When a wild animal dies in the wild, it's usually torn to pieces by predators or scavengers, and its remains are recycled back into nature. We can assume this is what happened to many ancient animals that have long since become extinct, but there are exceptions. For example, in 2009, researchers found an unusually preserved mummified body of a prehistoric bird in northeastern Siberia. It turned out to be the remains of an 8-year-old female who died suddenly from a heart attack. That's why she wasn't eaten by predators. Her death was so unexpected that she didn't even have time to be picked over by scavengers. The girl had died 340 years ago, but when scientists saw her fur, they realized it would only take a few decades for her to start looking like a modern Arctic fox. What made her different from her descendants over all these years? Most importantly, how did she manage to survive for so long without being noticed? Could this be because foxes learned not to touch mummies? Or is there some other explanation? Let's find out together. Well, it seems the secret of longevity has been known to animals for millennia. A group of scientists from several countries, including France and the United States, identified more than 20 species of animals that managed to cheat death. You must have seen a hydra in your dreams, a monster with many heads that grows to new ones if you cut off one. Actually, hydras exist in real life. This is a genus of small marine animals. Among them is the immortal jellyfish, Turritopsis dohrnii. It's capable of turning back the clock on its own biology. When the water temperature drops, the jellyfish begins to starve, becoming sluggish and gradually shrinking. After 2 weeks, it regains its former color, expands its dome and tentacles, and goes down to the bottom as a larva. It may seem that we're talking about a kind of rebirth. And in fact, in some sources, it's called the immortal jellyfish, but this isn't entirely correct. The thing is, at each stage of its development, the jellyfish has a chance to turn back the clock and return to the previous stage. For example, an adult jellyfish can turn into a larva again. A polyp can also turn into a medusa, which is another term for jellyfish. That's why scientists prefer to call Turritopsis dohrnii a transdifferentiating species. It's able to change its shape at any stage of its life cycle. Hydras don't actually increase their lifespan. They just constantly switch between different stages, going back to earlier ones when they realize they've reached their limit. But it turns out that immortality is not uncommon in the world of invertebrates. In 1909, a Danish zoologist discovered that a species of nematode can stop its biological clock for up to 30 years. Nematodes are microscopic roundworms that can be found almost everywhere. They live in soil, fresh water, and the bodies of other organisms. Some nematodes parasitize their hosts, while others are free-living. That is, they eat bacteria and organic matter in the soil. Nematodes have no natural enemies, so they sometimes cause damage to agriculture. Their larvae infect plant roots, slowing their growth. Nematodes have been known to carry viruses dangerous to humans and animals. However, this particular species of nematode is completely harmless to humans. It lives in soil and feeds on decaying plant matter. In 1980, a scientist from the University of Montana first noticed a strange property of this nematode. Under certain conditions, it stops growing and developing, entering a state similar to suspended animation. At first, scientists thought the worm had died, but then they noticed that under certain conditions, it could come back to life. It turns out that the worm slows its metabolism down to extremely low levels, surviving for decades until conditions improve. Moreover, experiments show that after waking up, the nematode continues to live quite naturally, seeking food and reproducing. Scientists believe that at slow speeds, the nematode's body produces special substances that protect its cells from damage, preventing them from dying. If we understand what exactly these substances are, they might help save people who suffered cardiac arrest. There are also creatures whose bodies don't break down after death. Take, for example, glass sponges. Living sponges have a skeleton made of calcium carbonate. When the organism dies, however, microorganisms begin to dissolve this skeleton. Over time, the sponge turns into dust. Glass sponges, on the other hand, have a skeleton made of silica, which is much stronger and more durable. As a result, the sponge maintains its shape even after death. Researchers from the University of Aberdeen use scanning electron microscopy to observe how sea stars, crabs, and other bottom-dwelling animals deal with dead glass sponges. Though none of them wanted to settle next to the sponges, probably because they didn't want to get inside them. but fish passing by weren't afraid to go inside, ate the remains of the sponges, and carried them away, thus recycling the silica. That's how glass sponges disappear from the ocean floor. But this process takes hundreds of years. In fact, sponges may remain unchanged on the seabed for thousands of years. But our list of immortal animals would be complete without the main character of fairy tales and legends. The hero whose adventures inspired countless poets and writers, the turtle. In Asian countries, turtles are considered symbols of wisdom and longevity, are kept as pets and bred specifically for consumption in restaurants. In China, turtle soup is considered a delicacy, especially when it's prepared with the addition of rare herbs and spices. The longest living turtle was a giant Galapagos tortoise named Jonathan. He was born around 1832. That's 190 years ago. Died in 2022. Jonathan lived on the island of St. Helena in the Atlantic Ocean. He was blind and couldn't see the end of his own tail. Nevertheless, he managed to mate with the few female Galapagos tortoises that ended up on the island. And it's easy to imagine how surprised Jonathan's numerous offspring were when they learned about the existence of a giant land mammal that looks a lot like a turtle. These mammals are called glyptodonts, belong to the order Xenarthra, which means strange joints. Strangely enough, glyptodonts are related to armadillos. In fact, they're the largest living relatives of armadillos. Glyptodonts have very strong bony shells covering their head, neck, and back. These shells are so hard that bulletproof vests are made from them. Well, they're not actually bulletproof, but they're resistant to bullets. The name glyptodonts comes from the Greek words glyptus, meaning smooth, and otis, meaning tooth. The shell of a glyptodon resembles a mosaic made of large, flat, bony plates. Scientists believe that glyptodonts got their unusual armor in the Cretaceous period. Back then, mammals were in danger of extinction. There were simply too many dinosaurs on the planet. Those were huge creatures with sharp teeth and claws. So in the blink of an eye, a predator could tear a small mammal to pieces. Armor protected glyptodonts from predators, but it was also a hindrance when it came to finding a mate. That's why glyptodonts developed the ability to quickly remove and put on their shell, kind of like a jacket. Female glyptodonts choose males with beautiful shells for mating. Perhaps in the future, scientists will find fossils of a male glyptodon who is trying to impress his chosen one by showing off his shell. And now I have a bonus for you. Did you know that a piece of amber can be an excellent preservative for insects? For example, a beetle that flew into a sticky tree resin drop in the Dominican Republic 15 to 20 million years ago was preserved whole. It's safe to say the beetle cheated death. Amber is fossilized tree resin that has survived to this day. Most often it can be found on the territory of the Baltic states. But pieces of amber also occur in other parts of the world, for example in the deserts of the USA and Mexico. One such piece was found in 1969 in the Dominican Republic. It weighed almost 33 kilograms and contained not only the remains of insects and spiders, but also a small lizard, a frog, and even the wing of a bat. It's believed that all these creatures were trapped in a sticky resin drop and died instantly. The bat likely fell prey to a bird that picked it up thinking it was a tasty piece of meat. Instead, the bird got stuck along with the resin drop, which hardened, preserving both the bird and the bat forever. Short, some creatures manage to cheat death not once, but dozens of times.